Hi, Ryan.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Okay, so I am Karen White of Divine Time Astrology, and I noticed that hardly anybody interviews Ryan. So we decided that I would come on his channel and interview him for a change.
I had to
Now,
pay.
what?
I had to pay her because no one interviews me because I'm a terrible interviewee. So anyway,
Oh, he's lively. It's really fun talking to Ryan. Okay, so what we're talking about today, we're talking about Mars and Mars's role in enlightenment. And the reason why we're talking about Mars is because Ryan and I have exactly the same Mars. It's Mars in Gemini at 7 degrees and some minutes. It's exact. It's kind of amazing. So we're Mars twins. No pun intended. Even though it's Gemini. And so basically, we're going to be talking about Mars. So now, Ryan does a lot of meditation retreats. He also has another channel on Kriya Yoga. And so, would you say that enlightenment was something that you were striving for in your life? I mean, even before you got really into astrology?
yeah. Well, before I got into astrology, I was always interested in things like philosophy and religion. I would say in the beginning, it wasn't necessarily for any idea of enlightenment. It was more of an idea of just trying to understand what's going on in this world or in this life experience, and also, Mars being a Tamasic planet. That planet is often focused on overcoming difficulties or overcoming dangers. And, as I was getting into meditation coming out of college, a lot of my focus was on overcoming things like anger and anxiety and depression. So for me, it wasn't really enlightenment. It was more, there was a sense of suffering,
Mm.
and there was a sense that somehow, there was a way to overcome this suffering. And, I explored it first through psychology. And once I had read the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, it seemed to me where psychology left off and philosophy left off, meditation and yoga practice sort of took over.
Yeah.
So, in a way, enlightenment wasn't the thing.
Mm.
It was more of a Martian drive, that Tamasic drive, really.
Well, that makes sense because Mars likes to fix things, improve things, and kill evils, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think ultimately his job is to, in terms of killing evils, is to kill off our own ignorance and that
Hmm.
sort of thing, like the inner life.
Right.
Um, okay, so now you have Mars angular in your chart. You have it in the 10th.
Hmm.
Mine is stuck there in the 6th.
Right.
So I think yours is a bit more um, prominent because any planet in one of the angles can manifest more easily.
Right.
You have it off opposite your moon as well,
Hmm.
the mind. So, how would you say that when you have Mars aspecting the moon like that, which is the mind, and you have it prominent, would you say that even though it's in Gemini, where it tends to have a harder time focusing, um, and it's in an enemy sign because Mercury is, Mars' only enemy. I mean, what has that been like for you? Has meditation helped you with that, or did you have a hard time with meditation because of that?
Yeah, well, I think that the idea of Mars and Gemini, for me, it wasn't necessarily an issue of focus, because I do have Saturn aspecting Mars as well. And so Saturn gave the ability for focus. That was not necessarily the issue. It was more of how Mars is starved by Mercury related to the idea of overthinking things.
Mm.
And what's interesting is that in my chart, not only is Mars in the sign of Gemini, um, but Jupiter is also with Mercury. And we know that Mercury also starves Jupiter because Mercury is an enemy to Jupiter. So my issue wasn't the focus; it was the idea of overthinking things, overanalyzing things. And so that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to vichara or self-inquiry as well as Kriya Yoga practice, because that allowed me to figure out that overthinking wasn't useful. And this is something that comes up a lot in the Kriya Yoga training courses that I do, because a lot of people come to Kriya Yoga and come to meditation, and they come from a background of, they want to learn all the Sanskrit they can. They want to go through all the levels of manifestation, all the different names for samadhi and enlightenment. It's like they have all this trivia about enlightenment, and that is a very Mercury, Mars type of enlightenment experience. So I understand why they have all those thoughts, why they want to take all the classes and make sure they have all the categories of cosmic manifestation nailed down, because that makes the mind feel safe, that if it's got a structure that it can rely on. But that in itself is one of those things where Mercury starves Mars, or Mercury starves Jupiter, that it prevents Mars from following its instinct to be very direct and get to the point without all the side trips. And with Jupiter, Mercury stops Jupiter from appreciating the bigger picture beyond the mind. So that influence of Gemini and Mars for me wasn't a focus issue. It was more of kind of cutting through all the mental chatter of that third sign, because the number 3 for Gemini is very important, and all the mental trivia is the best way I can think of it, that it's easy to accumulate when you're trying to fix things.
Wow, you know what? I think you really did. It described my struggle as well too, because I do have it there. I also have it aspecting the moon. I also have it aspecting Saturn,
right.
And Saturn's aspecting the moon. But in my Jupiter.
Oh, right.
And Jupiter's actually even ruled by Mercury, right? It's in Virgo. So there's like that real emphasis there on Mercury.
Right.
And actually, I have a friend where we get together on a regular basis and we do meditation, and sometimes we listen to you.
Oh.
It's really weird. I was sitting here in her living room and we're meditating, and your voice is on the video thing. And what I like about doing that is that you do give my mind something to do.
Right.
With Kriya Yoga, to distract it, I guess, or to focus it. So I'm not doing this,
right.
all over the place. And it really feels good, because I'm visualizing stuff, I'm feeling, sensing things through my body, and, some of the meditation techniques.
Right.
Very helpful.
Well, the idea, one of the best ways to get out of your mind, whether it's because you're stressed or anxious or had trauma of some sort, is actually to kind of explore more of a somatic experience. Like, for example, the little meditation that we did before we started today, just simply sitting and feeling the body and then listening to the sounds around you. It's like you're taking your awareness away from that chatter in the mind and becoming aware of what's actually happening right now. And that's a very kind of somatic experience, so that you're not distracted by all that mental noise. And that's one of the things that Mercury does to Mars, is it distracts it with mental noise, so it can't just know what it needs to do.
That's interesting. Before we go much further, I'm thinking that maybe enlightenment should be defined.
Okay.
If it can be. How would you define enlightenment?
That's a tricky, it's tricky, because everyone has their different ideas about what it means. To be enlightened about something simply means to be knowledgeable about something. So, for example, if we're thinking about being enlightened about the truth of our nature, well, that's learning about the self. If it's being enlightened about astrology, it's simply learning as much as we can about it. And one of my favorite books describes enlightenment as a word with no corresponding meaning. And what's interesting about that, I don't want to get too far out, but people have an idea of what enlightenment means, and usually it's based off what their current needs are, and that's absolutely fine. Because if I got involved in meditation because I wanted to know what's going on in life, philosophically. I wanted to kind of get through anxiety and the difficulties that I had mentally and emotionally. And so for me, the idea of enlightenment was, in a sense, freedom from that. Some people have an idea of enlightenment of they're caught up in a sense of, I will always be blissful and I will always be happy. Well, that's not going to be anyone's real experience long term, because there's always this rise and fall as long as we have a body. But as long as they have that goal, that intention towards this thing they think is enlightenment, they eventually come to a point of peace. And that's why there are so many stories where they describe people like looking for one thing but finding another. Like there's a story of these people that are told to go out in the woods to find firewood, and they end up finding the gem of knowledge. And that's like what we do when we're meditating. We start with this idea of what we're going to find, but as long as we're able to kind of grow through it and mature through it and kind of let go of attachments as we proceed, we don't find what we're looking for, but we end up finding some kind of peace. So in my mind, I would say that enlightenment is, it's knowledge about that which you want to know. But when it comes to the idea of maybe spiritual enlightenment, there's also a sense of peace, a sense of trust, and a sense of surrender that, and it all comes down to faith, I believe, because I believe it all comes down to faith in the sense that there comes a time when you have to let go of the mind. And when you let go of the mind, that's the scariest part. But then if you can trust that there's something greater going on beyond what your mind can know, that really has a capacity to settle you into something deep and profound, which is indescribable. And I think enlightenment, probably the bigger picture of it, is something indescribable. It's very much a personal experience.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very good description of enlightenment. It's true. It is more about something that you know a lot about. And yes, I think that enlightenment always comes along, the idea of it comes along with this belief that it means no more pain, no more frustration, that you just accept everything.
Right.
And other people know it immediately when they see you that you're an enlightened being.
Right.
I mean, that kind of thing. And then you're only here after that point to help other people, right? To grace the planet. But there's a lot more to it than that, apparently.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because it's not human nature really to want to be that detached from life, right? Most people, they still want a lot of things that the world has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, there was this one picture that I saw one time. It was like a little cartoon. It had the yogi on a mountain, and this fellow, I think he was dressed in a business suit. He had climbed up the mountain, and he just made it to the feet of the yogi. And in the bubble that the businessman was saying, he says, "I don't want enlightenment. I just want enough to get by." and that's pretty much what, honestly, if people are honest with themselves when they are seeking out enlightenment, most of the time that's really what they mean. They don't necessarily want to push they don't want to push all the way through, because that's going to take them beyond the mind, which is beyond their preferences. It's beyond their attachments, and that I will tell you that it can be a very scary thing for the mind. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm going to just read out some things about Mars.
Sure.
And see if that, triggers anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
So any sign that Mars is influencing will be a sign that it's an area of life where it will fight for something. Because I know Mars he's a Kshatriya or warrior planet like the sun. Mm-hmm. So he likes to lead and protect. He looks up because he's got an idea in his mind about how things could be better than they are. And so at least in your chart, he's in your 10th, he's aspecting this Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces. I hope you don't mind we're talking about your chart. Is that okay?
That's okay. Yeah, that's
okay. Fine. So Virgo is the ascendant, the self, right? Sagittarius is the 4th house where the moon is in your inner emotional life. And I'm wondering if that moon there on the 4th is helping with that. And then the 7th, right, is Pisces. Well, that's relationship.
Right.
And you happen to have Rahu there. No, you don't. K2.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, you're the expert on your own life, right? So,
right.
What do you want to say about that, if anything?
When I think about Mars and signs and houses, for example, what's the thing that actually inspired me to kind of get on the vocational path that I am on? Well, number one, when it comes to teaching meditation and Kriya Yoga, since I was young, I was just barely beyond a teenager when I got involved in meditation, and not very long after that was authorized to teach Kriya Yoga. The reason I got involved in it was because I saw a problem that needed fixed.